I want to apologize because last week I gave you an incorrect interpretation of the Gemara. Well, obviously because I wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise. But everybody else was here and they just bought into it. So that makes me...
I was just letting you,
right,
I didn't want to correct you in front of all the
right,
Talmudim.
that makes me a little bit nervous, but all right, it is what it is. So what was the case we were talking about? We've been talking about this case where there's alternating makom shchita and hagrama, either outside, outside, or inside, inside. Right, we've been talking about these cases back and forth. So the Gemara brought a particular ma'aseh, and this is what I misinterpreted to you. Fourth line down from the top of the page. Iklo Rav Nachman l'Sura. So Rav Nachman traveled to Sura. Hey Simon. Rav Nachman traveled to Sura. Ba'u minei, and they asked Rav Nachman the question. Shachat shlish v'higrim shlish v'shachat shlish mahu. If you cut in the makom hashchita a third, and then you do hagrama on the second third, and then you are back in the makom shchita for the final third, what's the halacha? Is the animal kosher animal or not a kosher animal? Now we've learned that this depends on a machlokes as to what is the determining factor for making it a kosher animal. Is it rove, or is it at the moment at which nafka chiyusa, when the animal's life is ended? So they asked this question to Rav Nachman, who came, and Amar Luhu, he said to them, Lav hainu de Rebbe Elazar bar Minyomi. Isn't this case answered by the position of Rebbe Elazar bar Minyomi? What was the position of Rebbe Elazar bar Minyomi? So here's where I mistranslated it for you, or I explained it incorrectly. The Amar Rabbi Elazar bar Minyomi. Rabbi Elazar bar Minyomi says, Shchita ha'asuya kimasreik kishera. That a shchita which is done in the fashion of a masreik is kshera. What is it? What does it mean in the fashion of a masreik? I translated it last week as shchita ha'asuya bimasreik. Right? Shchita that was done with a masreik. And I went through this explanation of a knife that has ridges in it and looks like a comb, and you let me get away with that, right? Shchita ha'asuya, but it doesn't say bimasreik, it says kimasreik. In other words, shchita that looks like a masreik. What is that referring to? So that, and I looked through Simla Chadash and I couldn't find it. What is it referring to? It's referring to a shchita where you sort of go like this. You know, as you're moving your knife through the animal's neck, you're like going like this, sort of as you, instead of cutting straight across like this, you're angling the cut and you're making a jagged cut. In other words, a jagged cut meaning if I look at the neck, if I were to trace the cut would go like this, like teeth. Right?
Is this what I said last time?
I don't believe so.
Where I said that the Simla Chadasha gives us an example.
Or maybe it is.
Where we started like this, and then because of the round nature of the siman, you kind of go like this, and then you go like in a different spot, so that it actually doesn't all end up in a connected. This was what I was. They're not all connected actually.
So maybe I didn't understand that. I'm not sure if it's because the siman is round.
I'm still not sure we're talking about the same thing. Well, maybe that was my deduction.
Right. So if I was doing this, right, according to the way I understand the Gemara now, if I were cutting, right, let's say this, just to make it easier, this whole thing is makom. Let's say this whole thing is makom hashchita, right?
Okay.
So I would cut like this.
Right, so I'm still not sure we're talking about the same thing. In my mind, we were talking about a cut where, because of the angle and the way you're holding your knife and turning your knife, the cuts in the let's say the kane are not actually connected. You're talking about it as though it's like a serrated cut in one.
Right, this cut is connected. Right, this cut is connected. However, it looks like the jagged teeth of a comb.
Like jagged teeth.
Meaning it comes up like this, and then down like this, and then up like this, and then down like this, and then up like this, and down like this. Right? That's what kimasrek means. I'm not sure if we're talking about the same thing or not talking about the same thing, but that's what kimasrek means. If you could find it in the Simla Chadasha, that would be awesome.
And there's no shehiyah in this kind of cut?
So there's no shehiyah in this kind of a cut. Remember that the shehiyah that we use halacha lemaisa, and the shehiyah of which the Gemara talks are two very different shiurim, right? So it is very possible, to even pause momentarily in this cut and not for it to be a shehiyah, But how does this answer, right? How does this or this answer of Rav Nachman, who says this is the position of Rabbi Elazar bar Minyumi, how does this answer the question? What was the question that Rav Nachman was asked? Rav Nachman was asked the question, Shachat shlish v'higrim shlish v'shachat shlish. Okay? So, according to the question that Rav Nachman was asked, it was a third in, a third out, and a third back in. Right? So Rav Nachman answers and says, well, that's Rabbi Elazar bar Minyumi. Right? Isn't that the same thing as Rabbi Elazar bar Minyumi? So what does that mean? How could this situation of Rabbi Elazar bar Minyumi be understood as an answer to this question? Because the question is talking about moving outside of the makom hashchita, right? A shlish in, a shlish out, and a shlish in. Okay. So in effect, the Gemara says that Rav Nachman is basing his answer on the assumption that, let me do it this way. We'll show and tell, okay? Let's assume that this here is the boundary of a makom shchita, all right? Up here is hagrama, down here is good shchita, okay? So what am I doing? So I'm putting my knife here. Now remember, I'm going jagged. That's the shchita kimasrek is jagged. So I'm starting here, cutting here, going up like this, down like this, up like this, down like this, up like this, down like this. What's going to happen in the end? The end is that there's going to be a certain percentage of the cut that is in the makom shchita, and a certain percentage of the cut that is outside of the makom shchita. But not like we've been discussing, not a third in and then a third out and then a third in, right? We're talking about, in, out, in, out, in, out, in, out, in, out, like that, all right? So that seems to be the answer that Rav Nachman is giving, that based on what Rabbi Elazar bar Minyumi says, in such a case, shchita asuya kimasrek ksheira. It is ksheira, right? That such a shchita is ksheira. What do you mean such a shchita is ksheira? That rove of that shchita is where? Rove of that shchita is within the makom hashchita. That's what it's saying. Rove of that shchita is within the makom hashchita. Okay, so asks the Gemara. In other words, you understand what he's saying? He's saying that, yes, I'm going out of the makom shchita, then I'm coming back into the makom shchita. Then I'm going back out of the makom shchita, and I'm coming back into the makom shchita. Out of the makom shchita, back into the makom shchita. Right? That's my shchita kimasrek. It looks like I'm thinking of like a jack-o'-lantern, the front teeth of the jack-o'-lantern, I don't know that's such a good example to give, but right, but this idea, this jagged kind of cut, right? So based on this answer by Rabbi Elazar bar Minyumi, who says that such a cut is ksheira, if we assume that part of that cut is in the makom shchita, and part of that cut is outside of the makom shchita, what is Rabbi Elazar bar Minyumi in effect saying? If rove of the cut is within the makom shchita, then it is considered acceptable. It's kshera. Because in this idea of going out, right, up like that, rove of the cut is going to be in the makom shchita. And that's kshera. And therefore says Rav Nachman, if that's the case, so a shlish in, a shlish out, and a shlish in, what's the halacha? The halacha should be kshera. Why? Because rove of the cut is in its appropriate place. Okay, you got something? Not yet.
Yeah.
Okay, we're looking in the Simla Chadasha, and it says as follows. Shchita ha'asuya keshine ha'masrek. Right? Is this what you were referring to? Is this
I'm not sure. Might have been referring to this seif where he talks about b'shnayim or shlosha mekomot.
Oh, right. Okay. So this is different. This is what we're talking about here. This is from the Gemara. Shchita asuya kishine hamasrek kagon shenichnas bisakino lema'ala be'ikum v'chazer ve'ikem lemata. Like this, right? Like a V, right? Continual V. Inami shelo nichnas bisakino klal l'soche chalal. Rak shachat oros dehasimanim saviv. Oros dehasimanim saviv saviv ad shenisgaleh hechalal. That's a whole different thing. Uva shchita ikem ve'ala ikem ve'yarad kshera. Rak im nizhar bakol zeh shelo yisheh. There shouldn't be a shehiyah. Velo ye'aker, and there shouldn't be an akir. In other words, you shouldn't tear it. Umihai taima nirali delo yasaken lechatchila she'efshar lavo lidei michshal upashut tzarich sheyeh rova siman shachut lefi hayosher ilu lo haya alachson. Right. So what is he saying?
Saying don't do this, but if you do it, it's probably
As long as rove of the siman is shachut lefi hayosher. I think that's what he's saying. Okay, so this is basically how Rav Nachman is understanding the position of Rabbi Elazar bar Minyumi, that when I do the shchita kim masreik, part of my knife, right? My knife is going out and in, out and in, out and in, out and in. Now I don't know how many times, obviously. You know, how many times on the neck can your knife go in and out, in and out, in and out? How many times in the simon can your knife go in and out, and in and out, and in and out? But whatever it is, so Rabbi Elazar bar Minyumi seems to be saying that if rove is within the makom hashchita, it's good, even though your knife wanders out of the makom shchita. As long as rove is in, it seems to be good. Rav Nachman says to the people who asked him the question, you're asking me a third in, a third out, a third in. Isn't that the same principle as Rav Elazar bar Minyumi, who says as long as rove is in, it's fine. You should be fine. So the Gemara says not necessarily. Why? Because Vidilma, we're counting down from the top now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines down from the top. Vidilma b'makom shchita. Maybe what Rabbi Elazar bar Minyumi is talking about is where the entire V is within the makom hashchita. Meaning, I cannot just borrow your pencil again for a second. Okay, meaning that when I shecht, instead of, let's assume this is outside of the makom, this is the boundary line, the top boundary line of the makom hashchita. So when I shecht, I'm shechting like this, right? That's how we first understood it, right? Now the Gemara is saying, wait, what are you talking about? Maybe what Rav Elazar bar Minyumi means is like this. In other words,
obviously within the sin.
Right? Everything within the makom shchita, right? You Rav Nachman want to bring us an answer that shlish in, shlish out, shlish in is kosher, because Rabbi Elazar bar Minyumi said that when you go this way, when you do this shchita kamasreik, like the teeth of a comb, so then that's kshera. That must be because rove of the shchita is in the makom hashchita. So therefore, use that as your guideline. The Gemara says, wait a second. How do we know that Rabbi Elazar bar Manyumi is talking about shechting outside of the Makom HaShchita? Who says that his V is going outside of the Makom Shchita? Ein hachinami. Everybody agrees you're making a V, right? But who's to say that the V is not all within the Makom HaShchita? Why are we assuming that it's going outside of the Makom HaShchita? If we assume it's going outside of the Makom HaShchita, so then Rav Nachman has a good point, right? This seems to be the answer of Rabbi Elazar bar Manyumi. But why should we assume that it's going outside of the Makom HaShchita? Says the Gemara, why shouldn't we assume that it's going outside of the Makom HaShchita? If it's staying in the Makom HaShchita, what's the Chiddush? Right? That's what the Gemara says. So the Gemara first asks the question, and the Gemara says, Vidilma, that perhaps, Vidilma b'makom shchita. Maybe this is all b'makom shchita, and if it's all b'makom shchita, so then Rav Elazar bar Manyumi is not telling us anything about shlish in, shlish out, shlish in. Says the Gemara, b'makom shchita, if we're talking about everything within the makom hashchita, my lememra. What's it coming to teach me? Duh, of course a cut that is totally within a makom shchita is a kosher cut. What's the chiddush? What is Rabbi Elazar bar Manyumi coming to teach me? If you tell me he's teaching me part of the V, part of the cut goes outside of the makom hashchita, oh, that's a chiddush already. That's like saying, okay, if rov of the cut is within the makom hashchita, good. But if you say, no, his V is much smaller, right? The frequency band of his V is much smaller. It's all within the makom hashchita, so then what's he coming to teach me? Right? What I need Rav Elazar bar Manyumi to come along to teach me that a cut that's entirely within the makom shchita is a kosher shchita? Of course it's a kosher shchita. So says the Gemara, wait a second. Mahu detema, you might have thought ba'inan shechita mifura'as. I might have thought that what do I need when I do a shchita? I might have thought that I need a smooth cut. In other words, I might have thought that I have to take my knife and go like this. But if I go like this, right, it's not a good shchita. That's what I might have thought. So along comes Rabbi Elazar bar Manyumi to teach me, no, even if you go like this, it is a good shchita as long as it's within the makom hashchita. Okay? So let's just get the series of events correctly, right? Rav Nachman from Surah comes to visit, and they ask Rav Nachman, nice to see you. What's the story on shlish in, shlish out, shlish in? Rav Nachman says, what are you asking me that question for? Isn't that what Rabbi Elazar bar Manyumi taught? He taught if you go in and out, and in and out, and in and out, as long as the rov is in, it's a good shchita. Apply the same law to your question. So the Gemara says, maybe the way that Rav Nachman is interpreting Rabbi Elazar bar Manyumi is incorrect. Rav Nachman is interpreting Rabbi Elazar bar Manyumi to say he's going out, in, out, in, out, in, out, in. Maybe it's all in. Says the Gemara, how can you even suggest it would all be in? Because what's he coming to be mechadesh if it's all in? Of course, if it's all in, it's a good shchita. No, the Gemara says we have reason to think that maybe even though it's all in, it's not a good shchita. Why? Because maybe we need shchita that just goes like this. Maybe we need a shchita that's a smooth, even cut. And a shchita cut that goes like this is not a valid shchita. That's what the Gemara wants to say. In other words, that's what potentially Rav Nachman, Rav Elazar bar Manyumi is coming to teach us. And if that's the case, so Rav Nachman doesn't have an answer based on that. So let's go back in the Gemara. The Gemara answers that Mahu detema, you might have thought ba'inan shchita mifora'as, that you need a shchita which is smooth, not jagged, which is smooth. Veleka, and here there's not a smooth shchita, here there's a jagged shchita. Answers the Gemara, kamash malan, what? No, it comes to teach me that a shchita which is jagged is a good shchita. And that's what the Simla Chadasha says. A shchita which is jagged is a good shchita. I do not need my shchita to be a smooth shchita. A jagged shchita is also a valid shchita. Okay, good. So what's the story with a shlish in and a shlish out and a shlish in? It's machlokas. Right? A shlish in, a shlish out, and a shlish in is a machlokas. whether you hold that the determining factor is rov, or whether you hold that the determining factor is nafka chiyusa, when the life of the animal is ended. If you hold that it's rov, so a shlish in, a shlish out, a shlish in is good. It's a good shchita. Why? Because rov of the cut was within the makam shchita. If you hold, on the other hand, that we're looking at nafka chiyusa, we're looking at that moment when the life of the animal is ended. So what do we say about such a shchita? It's no good. Why? Because at the moment when the life of the animal is ended, meaning when you cut through rove of the siman, right, at the moment that this animal's life is ended, where was your knife? It was outside the makom hashchita. Since it was outside the makom hashchita, it's not a valid shchita. So this case of a shlish in, a shlish out, and a shlish in, and its inverse case of a shlish out, a shlish in, and a shlish out, right, are decided based on these factors. Okay, rov and nafka chiyusa. Okay, now the Gemara continues. So I apologize for the explanation and the mistranslation. Maybe you could forgive me. A beis and a chaf could look similar. I don't know, but it's clearly a samach. I'm sorry. It's clearly a chaf, and it's shchita asuya kimasrek. Okay, the Gemara continues on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines down from the top. The Gemara gives us a siman for a way to remember the coming section of Gemara up until the Mishnah. Siman is Beis Chaf Daled. Beis Chaf Daled. What does Beis Chaf Daled relate to? Well, we're going to see it actually relates to names, to 3 names that are going to appear in the following Gemara. Okay. So first the Gemara is going to set the stage. What is the stage? Yosiv Rebbe Abba Achure de Rav Kahana. So Rebbe Abba was sitting behind Rav Kahana in the yeshiva, right? Rebbe Abba was sitting behind Rebbe Kahana. V'yosiv Rav Kahana kamei de Rav Yehuda. And Rav Kahana was sitting in front of Rebbe Yehuda. Now, this could be a little bit confusing to envision in your mind. All right, so let's look at it this way. All right, here's the teacher, here's Rebbe Yehuda. Here's Rav Kahana. They're sitting across from each other. That's what it means that Rav Kahana was in front of Rebbe Yehuda. And where is Rebbe Abba? He's behind Rav Kahana. Right? So you have the image in your head. Here's the teacher. Here's Rebbe Yehuda. Facing him is Rebbe Kahana. And behind Rebbe Kahana, still facing the teacher, is Rebbe Abba. Okay? So that's the scenario which is here. We'll see in a moment if that's an important scenario to know. Okay? The Gemara says, V'ka'amar, V'yasi V'ka'amar, that Rebbe Yehuda said the following thing in front of these Talmidim, in front of Rav Kahana and of Rebbe Abba. What did he say? Shachat shlish v'higrim shlish v'shachat shlish mahu. What's the halacha? Right? Shech did a third, right? A third in, a third out, and a third in. Mahu, what's the halacha? So Amar lei, so he said to him, Shchitoso ksheira. What's the halacha? Kosher. The shchita is kosher. Why is it kosher in this case? Why is it kosher in this case? Because the majority of the shchita was where? Inside. The majority of the shchita was in the makom hashchita, and therefore it's kosher, and that's what we're concerned with, where the majority of the shchita is. Higrim shlish, v'shachat shlish, v'higrim shlish, that if you are out for a third, and then in for a third, and then out for a third, mahu, what's the halacha? Amar lei, so Rabbi Yehuda responded and said, shchitaso psula. The shchita is no good. Why not? Because again, I'm interested in rov. Where is rov? Rov here is outside of the makom hashchita. Nafka chiyusa, at the moment when the animal died, the knife was in the right place. I don't care about that, says Rabbi Yehuda. What am I looking for? What am I being guided by? I'm being guided by rov. I want to know where rov is. If rov is in the makom shchita, it's a good shchita. If rov is not in the makom shchita, it's not a good shchita. Okay, that's what Rabbi Yehuda said. The Gemara says, Shachat bin makom nekev mahu. Right? Rav Kahana is asking the question, what about if you shechted bimakom nekev? What does that mean? So we've learned this before, right? Chatzi kana pagum, right? We learned this. What does it mean?
Injury?
It means there's a nekev. What is a nekev? A nekev is a hole. Let's call it a laceration. That a piece of the kana is already lacerated. And you put your knife in that laceration and you finish off the shechita. So that is shachat b'makom nekev mahu. What's the halacha? Amar le Rabbi Yehuda said to him, shchitaso kshera. What's the halacha? The shechita is good. Shachat ufaga bo nekev mahu. This is a little bit of a different case. What is this case? Shachat ufaga bo nekev. What does that mean? In other words,
And he
made a hole?
no, he
Shechted
shechted and he reached the hole.
Reached the hole.
He shechted and he reached the hole, meaning that there was a hole in the kaneh, but not at the beginning of the kaneh. He couldn't put his knife into that hole. He had to start shechting the kaneh, and when he shechted the kaneh, what happened? He shechted a little bit of the way in, and now he hits the hole. Right, and now he hits the hole. So, mahu, what's the halacha? So Rabbi Yehuda responded and said, Amar le shchitaso psula. That what? Such a shchita is not good. Such a shchita is not good. So let's just think for a moment. We have 4 things that Rabbi Kahana taught in this lesson. Right? 4 things that he said over in front of, 4 things Rabbi Yehuda said over in front of Rabbi Kahana and in front of Rabbi Abba. What were those 4 things? Number 1, number 1, out a third, number 1, in a third, out a third, in a third. What does Rabbi Yehuda say? Kosher.
Okay.
Kosher. Number 2, out a third, in a third, out a third. What does Rabbi Yehuda say?
Not kosher.
Not kosher. Why?
Not rove.
Not rove within. Okay? So that's 1 and 2. 3, I put my knife in the laceration and I finish the shechita.
Okay.
Kosher. Put my knife in the laceration, I finish the shechita. Kosher. Number 4, I start shechting through the kana and I hit a laceration, right? I hit a nekev, a hole. No good. Psula. So the first 2 we understand, right? We understand that Rabbi Yehuda holds by the principle of rov, right? Nafka chiyusa doesn't seem to interest Rabbi Yehuda. He holds by the principle of rov. Okay. But what's the explanation for 3 and 4? What's the explanation for case 3 and 4? Okay, that's what we're going to be spending the rest of the night on, is trying to understand 3 and 4, where you put your knife into the laceration and continue to shecht, or where you started shechting and then hit a hole in the kaneh that way, right? We're gonna try to understand these 2. So what happens? So says the Gemara. Okay, we're on 19b2 if you want to follow on the English side. Says the Gemara, Azal Rebbe Abba Amra Kamei de Rebbe Elazar. So Rebbe Abba heard these 4 things from Rebbe Yehuda. Remember, where was Rebbe Abba sitting? He was sitting behind Rebbe Kahana. Right? Rebbe Kahana was sitting opposite Rebbe Yehuda, who was the teacher.
Heard?
What?
What does Azal mean?
No, he went to. Azal means to go to. Right? Azal Rebbe Abba, right? Rebbe Abba went. Amra Kameh, and he said these things in front of Rebbe Elazar. He said these things in front of Rebbe Elazar. In other words, Rebbe Abba had been at the shir, and he heard Rebbe Yehuda say these things, and now he comes to Rebbe Abba and he says, this is what I heard from Rebbe Yehuda. Azil Rebbe Elazar, what happened? So Rebbe Elazar goes, Amra Kameh de Rebbe Yochanan. And what does he do? And he tells it over, the same 4 things. He says it over before Rebbe Yochanan. You can imagine, this is right, this is what's happening. Right? Yeah, this is what's happening. Okay. Amar le Rebbe Yochanan says to him, wait a second. My shna, what's the difference? In other words, what's the difference between 3 and 4? The halachos about case number 1, which is a third in, a third out, a third in, that's clear why that's the case. The halacha about case number 2, a third out, a third in, a third out, is also clear. We have no questions about those two cases. But asks Rabbi Yochanan, what's the difference between putting my knife in a laceration that's currently existing and finishing the shechita, or starting to shecht and now having my knife hit the hole in the kana and finish the shechita that way. Amar le, Rabbi Yochanan says to my shna, what's the difference? So Amar le, so Rabbi Lazar responds to him and says, shachat b'makom nekev. You shechted by putting your knife into the laceration. Shachat b'makom nekev. Na'aseh, what is this similar to? Na'aseh kemi sheshachat oved kochavim v'gamar Yisrael, like the case of an oved kochavim who began the shechita and a Yisrael who finished the shechita. What's the case? What's such a halacha? What is the halacha in such a case? What are we talking about? Let's say your oved kochavim comes along and he takes your shechita knife and he starts to shecht. Now, if an oved kochavim shechs rov of the siman, what's the halacha? Obviously, it's psula, right? It's obvious psula, right? An oved kochavim is not mitzuva on shechita; it's obviously psula, okay? But what happens if an oved kochavim comes along and he starts to shecht, and then you come in and finish the shechita? So we'd have to deal with the shehiyah problem a little bit, right? Again, we can resolve the shehiyah problem by saying the Gemara's definition of shehiyah and the halacha's definition of shehiyah is really different. But according to the Gemara's understanding of shehiyah, we could, right here, the oved kochavim starts, and then you tell him to stop, and now you go and you finish the shechita.
I mean, we don't even have to worry about the shehiyah problem if he doesn't stop. Right? If he's going and you take the knife handle right behind him and keep going, I suppose it could...
Okay, so what's the halacha under such circumstances? If an
saying
oved...
if he took over before...
If the Jew took over, the oved kochavim started the shechita, and then the Jew took it over. What is that? What's a halacha under such case? It's kshera.
Clearly, otherwise they wouldn't give this example.
Right? It's kshera. It's no different. In other words, why should the shechita of an oved kochavim be any different than a laceration? Right? In other words, a laceration came from what? I don't know, a wire, the nail of another animal. Who knows what the laceration came from? Is that worse than an oved kochavim? No. In other words, a laceration that you put your knife in and shecht, finish the shechita, we know that that's good. That's called chatzi kana pogum. Why is that any different? Says the Gemara. This is what Rabbi Elazar is explaining to Rabbi Yochanan. Why is that any different than a goy, right, an oved kochavim shechting the first part and then you finishing the shechita? Right, it's the same thing. Why is a laceration any better Why is the laceration any better than an oved kochavim? That's what the Gemara is saying. Right? So, my shna, amar le, shachat b'makom nekev, na'aseh kemisha shachat oved kochavim v'gamar Yisrael. However, in the case of shachat ufaga bo nekev, in the case where you started the shechita and now your knife hits the pocket, right? It hits that place where there's already an injury, where there's already a cut. Internally, there's a cut. I don't know, the animal must have swallowed something that cut a piece of its nekev. Cut a piece of its kana. In the back, right? So now you go through the cut, right? You start the cut, and what happens? Your knife now joins up with that nekev. So you're going like this, and all of a sudden there's absolutely no resistance on your knife. And your knife just goes like that, okay? So what is that situation? That situation is na'aseh kemi sheshachat Yisrael v'gamar oved kochavim, right? V'gamar oved kochavim. That what would we consider that? So Rabbi Lazar explains that's like a Yisrael started, and who finished the shechita? And Oved Kochavim. So basically what Rabbi Lazar is explaining is that wherever there is a pre-existing cut, right, a pre-existing cut in the kaneh, we are looking at that as if an Oved Kochavim was the one who did that. Wherever there's a pre-existing cut. So if the pre-existing cut is in the beginning, it's an Oved Kochavim began the shechita and a Yisrael finished. If the previously made cut was not at the beginning, so you started the shechita, it's like a Yisrael started the shechita, but who finished it? An Oved Kochavim. So if an Oved Kochavim starts and a Yisrael finishes, it's good. If a Yisrael starts and an Oved Kochavim finishes it, it's not good. And that seems to be what the svara of Rebbe Yehuda was when he answered this question, right? Because he said, if you shecht in the place where the laceration is, it's a good shechita. On the other hand, if you shecht and then hit the laceration, it's not a good shechita. This must be the chiluk.
So this takes us out of an issue of rov. Seems to, right? Because we're not asking the question.
We're not dealing with rov, right? We are not dealing with rov
anymore. The first two examples were issues of rov.
Correct.
Now we're saying rov except, right? Or rov unless. If we had an Oved Kochavim, or if we were dealing with a Nekev or whatever, rov doesn't matter anymore. It's the location of the Nekev, or it's where, or it's the.
It's whether it's
shechita that the Oved Kochavim does the work.
It's if the nekev is at the front of the neck, it's considered like an Oved Kochavim started the shechita, and if the nekev is in the back of the neck, it's considered like an Oved Kochavim finished the shechita.
Right, but in either case, we don't care whether it's majority or not majority.
Right, majority or not majority does not seem to play a role here, but it might. I'm not sure. At least initially, it doesn't seem to play a role here. So remember this. So Rabbi Yochanan said, I don't understand the difference between these two cases. In other words, why should there be a difference between a nekev in the front or a nekev in the back? Why should there be a difference? In other words, it should be the same halacha. So Belazar wanted to explain to him and say, no, if it's that we consider the nekev like an Oved Kochavim shechita. And we know that there's a difference as to whether an Oved Kochavim shechted at the beginning or an Oved Kochavim finished the shechita. If an Oved Kochavim shechted at the beginning and Yisrael finished the shechita, it's a good shechita. If, on the other hand, the Yisrael started the shechita and Oved Kochavim finished the shechita, it's not a good shechita. So what Rabbi Lazar was explaining is by saying a nekev equals Oved Kochavim. Rabbi Yochanan hears this, and what does Rabbi Yochanan say? So the Gemara says, Kari alei, Rabbi Yochanan sent to Rabbi Elazar, Oved Kochavim, Oved Kochavim. Right? And in fact, what is this Oved Kochavim business? You can almost, hear it say, Oved Kochavim, Oved Kochavim. You're talking, right? You think that that's explaining this, right? You could stand on your head and say Oved Kochavim all you want. It's not going to be a satisfactory answer here, right? Why? So Amar Rava. So Rava said, Shapir Kari Ale Oved Kochavim, Oved Kochavim. That what Rabbi Yochanan was saying, meaning how you're trying to explain this to me by Oved Kochavim is correct. Bishlama Hasam, right? In the case, in the case where there was already a laceration to begin, Bishlama Hasam, Midahave le Yisrael mishchat ruba velo shachat ki nafka chiyusa bida de Oved Kochavim kanafka. Right? What is he saying? In the case over there, in the case where the nekev, the knife went in, and all of a sudden the resistance disappeared, and the knife is now in an empty area where there was a previous injury, right? So under those circumstances, says Rabbi Yochanan, at the moment of nafka chiyusa, right? How do we define nafka chiyusa? Remember, how do we define nafka chiyusa? Rov, right? So I'm starting to cut. And I'm starting to cut. I cut 49%. Still I haven't hit nafka chiyusa. At 49%, my knife suddenly hits no resistance. Meaning that I'm now in the empty space that was created by this injury. Now, did I do any cutting at the time of nafka chiyusa? No. At the time of nafka chiyusa, what? At the time of nafka chiyusa, I was not cutting, and therefore, therefore the shchita is psula. That's what Hassam is referring to. About hacha, right? But here in our case, right? Yisrael lemishchat ruba. The Yisrael has to shecht rov v'lo shachat, and he didn't do that here. Ki nafka chiyusa, when the animal's life ended, biyada da oved kochavim kanafka. Right. So in the case of the oved kochavim, at the moment that the animal's life ends, right? If we say in the case of an oved kochavim who finished, in other words, a Jew started and an oved kochavim finished. So what do we say? What was happening at the moment of nafka chiyusa?
The oved kochavim.
The oved kochavim was shechting. Therefore, under those circumstances, it's not good. Elahacha, but in our case, michdi mishchat shachit mali b'makom nekev mali pagabo nekev. What is Rabbi Yochanan saying? Rabbi Yochanan is saying, you can't compare this case of a pre-existing laceration, either a laceration at the front of the neck or a laceration internally. You can't compare this case to the oved kochavim. Because why is the shchita by the oved kochavim not good if the Jew began and the oved kochavim finished it? Because at the moment of nafka chiyusa, who is shechting? The oved kochavim. The oved kochavim is making a shchita. And when the animal's life ends, it's the oved kochavim who's at the helm. It's the oved kochavim who's got the knife in his hand.
And this seems to be accepted because we're moving on to the next Mishnah.
No, but he's saying, under those circumstances, we can't accept that shchita.
Right.
Right? However, in our case, right, in the case of a nekev, what does Rabbi Yochanan say? It's not like an oved kochavim shechted, right? In other words, the psul of an oved kochavim shechting after a Jew is that at the moment the life is ending, who's holding the knife? The oved kochavim. Not good. But if it's a nekev,
It's not an oved kochavim.
it's not an oved kochavim, right? If it's a nekev, then who cares whether the nekev is at the beginning of the neck or at the end of the neck? And that is indeed how our sugya ends, that despite the fact that Rabbi Yehuda in the yeshiva, when he was sitting with Rav Kahana and Rav Abba, in spite of the fact that Rabbi Yehuda said, you know what, if he starts with the laceration, if the laceration is at the front of the neck, it's good, but if the laceration is inside, it's no good, Rabbi Yochanan disagrees. And what does Rabbi Yochanan say? Rabbi Yochanan says it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether he shechted in the makom hanekev or whether he shechted and then pagabo nekev. Okay? So we got that? Yes? No? Maybe? Mm-hmm. Good?
Yes.
Okay, good. So we're going to stop. We'll stop here, and let's go through the Mishnah. We'll start. Let's jump. We still have a few more minutes left. Let's do the Mishnah. Okay. So what does the Mishnah say? Yutes Amud Beis. The Mishnah says, "Hashochet min hatzdadin, shchitaso ksheira." So you all know what this is. What is shchita min hatzdadin? What does that mean? Shchita min hatzdadin. In other words, normally shchita is done from where? From the front of the neck. But if you shechted from the side, can you do that? Can you shecht from the side?
Yeah.
Of course.
Some animals.
Right? Right? Of course you can shecht from the side. Right? And the question is, which of the simanim do you hit first? If you shecht from the front, we know which of the simanim you're going to hit first, usually. Right? But when you're shechting from the side, it becomes a little bit questionable which of the simanim you're hitting first.
Unless you move the simanim.
Unless you move the simanim. And a lot of that depends on, if you turn the neck of the animal, you can pop the simanim, in a particular way. Okay. So hashochet minat stadim shchita so kshera. If you shecht from the sides, the shchita is kshera. Obviously, all of this we're going to learn in the Gemara. See what it means. Hamolek min hatzdadin melikaso psula. What is malika?
It's the korban.
right? So malika is not cutting with an instrument. Malika is the thumbnail of the Kohen Gadol was sharpened, right? Some mohalim, if you look at some mohalim, you'll notice that their thumbnails are longer and sharper. And why is that? Because it enables them to do a priya. What's priya? Right, when you do the bris milah, right? So when you do the bris milah, you're really dealing with two things, right? The first thing is you're dealing with the skin, which is covering the top of the orla, or the skin is the orla, which is covering the top of the aver, right? That gets cut. But once, in other words, in order to cut that skin off, what happens? So in order to cut that skin off, you pinch the skin above the tip of the aver. Because if you don't do that,
You could get the wrong spot.
Right. So you pinch the skin above the top of the aver. Some mohalim then put a magain, they put a shield there to prevent any possible cutting into the aver itself. Okay. Now, when you then make the cut, right? When you make the cut, and now you release your magain, what happens to the skin?
I never looked so closely.
The skin retracts.
Goes back.
Because imagine you're pulling the skin, it's like this. You're pulling the skin forward like this, okay? You're clamping, right? The skin wants to go back here. You're pulling it forward. There's a lot of loose skin, right? You're pulling the skin forward, you put your magain here, you slice like this. You take your magain off, what's gonna happen? The skin goes back. So what is revealed? The head of the aver, the top of the aver. But what is underneath the skin on top of the aver? There's a membrane underneath the skin on top of the aver. That membrane has to be removed. That's what's called priya, right? The priya is the removal of that membrane, right? So it's easier to do if your thumbnails are longer and sharper. It's easier to do. That's the priya. It's almost, unless you know what to look for, and you are mamish like this, you don't see it. You don't see it, okay? Because it all happens so quickly. It's not like a slow. I mean, I described it in a very slow way, but it doesn't happen that slowly. The Kohen had a right thumbnail that was long and sharp. And what did he do? He punctured the neck of the bird from the back. He punctured the neck of the bird from the back. He severed the spinal cord, and he kept going until he severed the simanim, or at least one of the simanim of the bird. Okay? Now again, he didn't sever it by slicing. It's not like he sharpened his fingernail on the sides. No, his fingernail was pointy, and he just punctured. He went in and he punctured. A bird's siman is small enough that you can do that. You can puncture your way literally through the whole siman. That's called malika. So malika is done from the back of the neck. So says the Gemara, Hashochet minat stadim, if you shechted from the minat stadim is really from the front here. That's the understanding. Minat stadim is from, it's not like, we're not talking about coming in this way. We're not talking about coming in from the side like this. We're talking, minat stadim is coming in from the front. Hashochet minat stadim shchitaso kshera. Hamolek minat stadim, if you did malika minat stadim, milikaso psula. In other words, if the Kohen held the bird and then punctured the kaneh from the front, that would make the malika psula, and the bird would not be able to be offered as a korban.
That is like basically the almost the opposite of everything shchita related.
Right, correct. Okay, so that's shchita minat stadim. I guess minat stadim here means the sides. Okay, then hashochet min probably the front. Hashochet min haoref, right? If you shecht, what is the oref? The oref is the back of the neck. If you shecht from the back of the neck, shchita so psula. The shchita is no good. Hamolek min haoref, but if you do malika from the oref, Melikaso kshera. Right? What do we say? The
That's the right way
malika
to
is
do it.
kosher. So hashochet minat savar shchitaso kshera hamolek minat savar melikaso psula. Shekol haoref kosher lemelika v'kol hatsavar kosher leshchita nimtza kosher b'shchita pasul b'melika kosher b'melika pasul b'shchita. So what is exactly what Natan is saying? What is the relationship between shchita and malika? They seem to be complete opposites. That what's kosher by shchita is pasul by malika, and what's kosher by malika is pasul by shchita. Now, we're going to be talking here about carbon shchitos, right?
So
if
this
you
is
do
not chulin, this is
if you
kosher.
do malika on a bird to eat from the back of the neck, you can't eat it,
Right.
right? It's only good for a carbon. Similarly, if you take a bird and you shech the bird, you can't bring it as a carbon. So in Yirtzeh Hashem, we'll next week continue on with this Gemara. Shkoyach, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi.